Wish I Would Have Known. Hi, and thank you for joining the Wish I Would Have Known podcast, or as we like to call it, WIWHK. I'm your host, Troy Vera. I'm inspired by the variety of surprise twists and turns that people have taken in their careers, and will continue inviting them to share their stories with you. Our guests represent diverse lines of business. You'll meet social workers, symphony musicians, racehorse owners, radio personalities, human resources leaders, commercial real estate lenders, filmmakers, and school principals, just to name a few. Join us and hear what has worked for them and what might just spark a fire in you. This podcast, as always, is going to be a conversation between friends and peers, nothing too crazy or fancy. We'll be sharing life's experiences in the interest of helping you grow and succeed in your current or even a new career field. We're spending the afternoon with Tamari Dunbar, and she's going to tell us a little bit about her career as a performing actor. Hi, Tamari.
Hello. How are you doing, Troy?
Wonderful. I really appreciate your time. We've known each other for quite a few years. One of the really neat things about being able to do these sessions with friends and peers is just learning a lot more about them from behind the scenes. Let's get a quick little elevator pitch bio about you.
All right. So basically, I grew up in the Bay Area and I went to school in Utah State University. I pretty much got the theater acting bug, bit me when I was like 9 or 10 years old. Been performing when I was a child into my teenage years. And then I went to school for that at Utah State and graduated mid-90s, and then met my husband, and we moved out to New Jersey to pursue this professionally. We ended up having all of our children in New Jersey, and that kind of changed the trajectory a little bit for me. But I worked professionally out on the East Coast, and then we decided to move back to Utah, where most of our family was living. And then I continued to work in the theater and work in film and voiceover acting. And I love to work with young people and coach them and just support them in the arts, any kind of arts. I just love it all, and I think it's essential. So that's what I do now, is I'm a professional actress and a voiceover artist. And special emphasis for me is just taking time to serve with the youth in the arts that are in our community. That's what I do.
There's so many competing priorities. They want to scroll, have the screen time right there in their face. And whenever I'm mentoring youngsters in the creative, like the design side, I always remind them we have to be able to do things that don't require Wi-Fi, batteries, or sometimes even power. That we as ready professionals need to have that wisdom already just ready to go. And it's not going to be perfect the first time, but be willing to take some of those calculated risks and make the good kind of mistakes to refine yourself. You mentioned earlier that you started performing at an early age. Was there something else perhaps that was in the back of your mind that you also wanted to be? A doctor, astronaut, pilot? What was did you have anything else other than, or is this always been your?
This is pretty much always been. I just remember being a young child, very early memories. Imaginary play was so huge in my life. Like I would get so involved in whatever that scenario was in my head that my siblings would have a hard time getting my attention because I was so involved. They could be right there, even like Tamari, and I just, you're here, like I would just get really involved in like playing different characters. And I loved music and just would lip sync and dance and make up dances to like, I don't know if you remember the Neil Diamond album, The Jazz Singer, we come to America. I had that whole album like choreographed and I would do it in my living room. And so I think it was just in my blood from the beginning. And I loved shows like the Carol Burnett Show and I Love Lucy and anything Julie Andrews did. Like I was just, those three women were just like, I just thought, wow, if I could just be like them, and everything that they did, I just thought they were strong, independent, intelligent, but funny and so talented. And so just being inspired by them as a young kid, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. And I think the clincher was when I saw the movie Annie. I think it came out in 1982. And Carol Burnett was in that as Miss Hannigan. But when I saw like little girls could do what she was doing, I was like, okay, I'm doing this. So that was it for me. I was like, this is my path. And so my mom would ask me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, an actor and a mom were the two things I wanted to be.
Well, I think it's not very much of a stretch to say nailed it.
Yeah, exactly.
So early on, as your acting chops and your experience kicked in, did you have somebody who really molded you, or did you just kind of come to the performing arts with already a POV? Maybe bold. You mentioned earlier about shows and movies. The show Fame also.
Yeah.
A ton of people out in front. There's also other performing arts movies like Break-In and some of those that were just, it was a time of exploration and freedom and innocence. There really wasn't a whole lot loaded into this. It was, you know how to sing, you're going to sing. There was no ulterior motive. Exactly. There was no sketchy themes. It was just performance for the sake of reading something from nothing. So did you have somebody who took you by the virtual hand or maybe around the shoulder and put you on the right path other than your heroes from the small and big screen?
Yes. So definitely my mother played a big role in all of this. She saw early on that I could sing well. And so she started putting me in little talent shows and supporting that. And then there was a woman at one of maybe like the third talent show that I did, and she ran a children's theater. And her name was Susan, and I don't remember her last name, but she came up to my mom and said, hey, would she want to be part of this children's theater? And my mom was like, oh, like, yes, and so that kind of got us into the theater world. My mom hadn't really been in that world with any of my other siblings. And so she was learning as I was learning, all about this, but she truly became a stage mom. And every sense of the word, she drove me to she got me into lessons, singing lessons, dancing lessons. We didn't do much acting back then. I think that's kind of what I learned on the job just by watching my peers and watching other people perform, like how you would deliver a line. And so my acting has come a long way since I was a kid because I've had classes since then. I also feel like it's important to learn on the job, right? This is one occupation where you can learn as you go, really. And you might start out with smaller parts and then eventually graduate up into the bigger roles. But I would say my mom was definitely critical in all of that. Like, she got me where I needed to go, and she never said I couldn't do it. She was always dreaming with me and dreaming just as big or bigger than me with that. And she made me feel like I could do and be anything. So that was really great. I think I've heard from my peers now as an adult who are in the arts that they said their parents were kind of like, oh, you can't really make money doing that. You can't really, that's not really a viable career. It's a roller coaster ride. And my mom never said that to me. Like, I just thought, yeah, I can do this. Like, there's no reason why not. And so going into that with that kind of confidence and with her support, I would say she's probably my biggest influence in my early years, for sure.
That speaks to a very delicate balance of belief and pushing. I think it's safe to say that some of the parents who were those are performing artists or athletes, maybe living vicariously through their young ones. But she really had the opportunity to encourage you to take that living room stardom and transition it to stage or wherever it happened to be, musical reviews. I remember when we used to go to Great America in Santa Clara, they had musical acts. Some of the Warner Brother characters would come out and dressed in their little fuzzy costumes, but there would be, people with the little straw hats and the vests, and they would do little dance routines right there in the middle of the sidewalk. Everybody would stop what they were doing, and like I was mentioning before, days before the phones, and watch. And even if they were already on the way somewhere or hungry or had to use the restroom, people just kind of stopped in their tracks and enjoyed the show. And I think that was really neat to, I'm sure that probably inspired you too, just to say, this doesn't have to be on a stage. This can be anywhere. It can be atmosphere.
Yeah. I think that's important to note too. Like you're saying, like the arts, it's broad, right? There's so many occupations within that umbrella. So it's it's really important to know that when someone says you can't make a living in the arts, I just feel like that's a false statement. I just feel like, no, you can find, and there's niches, there's little places for everybody. I feel I get what people are saying. Percentage wise, you look at how many actors are working versus how many are not. But there's also other variables with that and other factors that go along with that. So I think if someone wants to pursue this, they can and they should, and that there's a living to be had. Don't buy into that.
One of the questions I like to ask too is about something that may be like an emotional slight that drove you to more success. And it might be those people who are just saying, no, you can't, or no, you shouldn't, or why don't you be an accountant like your dad or a nurse like your mom, whatever that might have been.
Yeah.
But this is your path, and you know that you were firmly on this, and you're going to give it everything you have, morning, noon, and night, and dream about it and wake up thinking about it. And even if it makes you just a little sad sometimes when you don't win every role, or perhaps just kind of have a bad performance or a shaky night, you have that goldfish memory. And tomorrow's another day, or the next take, or the next song. There's that resilience that you undoubtedly learn. And speaking of goldfish memory, the opposite of that is an iron safe memory. How do you go about memorizing a script? You get it X amount of weeks beforehand, and camera rolls, and you say those words.
Right.
What's your process on doing that?
Yeah, so that's probably the question I get asked the most. I think maybe because a lot of people struggle with retaining verbatim a script or a talk or something that they might have to say. It's definitely, I feel, a muscle, so to speak. It's like from a young age, I've been memorizing, right? And so I've been using that tool my whole career. And so it becomes kind of second nature. It starts to become a little bit more easy as you go and you get older, because you kind of learn and your brain kind of knows what to do. And so there's different tricks. A lot of it for me is just repetition. It is laborious and it's not pretty, It's a lot of it is just taking and sitting and knowing I'm going to be here for the next 2 hours or whatever time you allot yourself. And I'm just going to be sitting with these words and I'm going to repeat. Then you start to do little tricks where you might, sometimes I'll record on a little device, depending on what time of life, because, I'm in my 50s now. And so it used to be tape recorders. And then it was like those little like handheld recorders you'd push and they just recorded. That's all they did. Now it's my phone. And so I put like my cues. So I would have I'd say my line before and I'd leave a space. And then I would say my next cue or the person's line, and then I'd leave a space for my line. And so then I would run it with that recorder. So it was like, and then I'd get up on my feet and I would learn spatially. Okay, I'm going to be over here by the couch when I say this, or I'm going to do over. And that would help sometimes with actors who do learn more in the space. And then sometimes you have little tricks where you take the first letter of each line and you write it and you just look at that. And you say it with just the first letter of each word. So there's all these different tricks. And then, of course, my favorite is to run it with somebody. I grab one of my kids or I grab my husband or a friend and I just run them. And then we try it different ways and we try different things. Because as I learned as an actor, it's really about listening. So it's nice to have someone there feed the line to you, your cue to you in a different way so you can react in a different way and just have fun with it. So a lot of it is repetition. No matter what tool I just spoke of, it's just repeating. So it's not glamorous, but your brain does start to learn how to do it very quickly. And I don't have that capability. Like some of my friends can just look at something and they've got it. Like they have like what do they call it? Photographic memory or whatever. Yeah, I don't have that. So I had to work a little harder, but I could tell you like, oh, it's in this paragraph on the top of the page here. Like I know kind of where it is, but I don't know exactly what it says. So it's funny, as I've gotten older, that starts to decline just a little bit, as you get into your middle age. So I really think it's helped my brain in a lot of ways to stay active because I continue to memorize even now. But I think it's funny how when you start to get older, you're like, oh, what, you're not as quick. And so now I know I have to take more time with the script, and so you have to kind of look at that too. When you have exhaustion or when you're not feeling well, or you kind of have to adapt and give yourself more time. to memorize, and so that you don't stress out the last minute when you're like, I've got to have this memorized, before I go on camera, before I go on stage. So
heard from other actors that sometimes they'll change the format of what they're saying to sort of shock their system. They'll sing the lines, or they might do it in a funny voice, but then they relax and ease into it. So the challenge is big, and then the ramp down, the regular stuff is, oh, this is not bad at all. And
right.
So they'll kind of mix things up and try it in a different format.
That's really important for film, is improvisational skills, right? And so a director will want you to do it differently each take so that they can kind of, film is a director's medium. And so it is a collaboration with the actors, but it still is very much like they kind of piece it together with the editor, their vision. And so it's fun when you can give them something different each take. Or if you chat, like, let's try it this way. And then, and then you collaborate after, let's try it again this way. So it just depends on your director as far as the process of how you achieve those different takes, whether you collaborate with them or whether you surprise them. And it makes the day more fun to be able to just be loose, be free. Sometimes they'll add stuff on the day or in the moment. And your mind has to be quick enough to be like, okay, I have new information. And if you just play and not get in your head and stressed about it, you accomplish it much better, than if you're, oh no, am I going to remember that? When you doubt, it falls apart. And so, and you deal with that all the time as humans, right? We always have that little bit of panic or doubt in our head, like, am I going to get this? Am I going to succeed? And then it's neat when you can just let that go and just have fun. So I think that improvisational spirit is really important.
One of our other guests, Callie Severson-Oberhoy, and she's a symphony musician, and she plays French horn with the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. And she also said, we just have to remind ourselves that we are playing in the orchestra. It is a job, but it's the spirit of release and freedom and playfulness. And the looser you are, the better the product becomes, because other people sitting in the audience or watching you feel that. It translates. If it feels like we're basically getting a root canal, that awkwardness really colors the consumption of your work.
Right. And the audience can tell. I think they can tell when you're in your head. It's great when you're in a theater, in a space, sharing that space with an audience and the actors on stage. There's nothing like live theater. It's my favorite. And when you have those moments, they know something's wrong. They can't pinpoint it, but they know something's wrong. You're overthinking it. You're panicking. But if you just relax, and if things go wrong, if you roll with it, again, like you're saying, that sense of play in the moment, they'll play with you. They'll go with it. It's almost like you have to just be like, welcome to my living room. You're all here. Just that relaxed to be able to captivate them and bring them in and welcome them into the space and let them know they're in good hands and that they're going to have a good time.
With the need to separate yourself from your craft and your daily life. Let's say you're on the way to the theater and you get a flat tire, you get a ticket. Somebody calls you with some bad news. How do you strike a balance with personal life and staying consistent, even though there's all these external forces? It could even just be 2 minutes beforehand and somebody backstage is just in a sour milk mood, but you have to be yourself, your part, your whatever. How do you balance that consistency? Do you just have that goldfish memory and say, okay, chalk it up to life going on, and here we are, we're live?
Yeah, I think so. For me, breath is so important. Breathing techniques and exercises, or even just a deep breath in and out, tells your brain it's okay. We're going to be okay. No matter what's happened previous, I've definitely gone on stage in some pretty awful circumstances happening beforehand. And I think allowing yourself, it's almost like a disassociation, obviously, but it's also taking care of your body in a sense that, and I think this is a great life skill, is just putting things in perspective. And breath can sometimes help us do that. It's just like, and let's just relax for a moment. Let's put things into perspective. Let's look at what's ahead of us right now. Let's take care of what we need to take care of in this show and on stage. And often I will share the experience maybe with a fellow actor that often will give me another sense of support so that they know, oh, they just had this car accident, or they just lost somebody in their family, or they had some really bad news, or whatever the case may be. When you have that and other people are aware, it's just like this prayer. It's like this coming together where they've got you. And it's just like they know the show as well as you do, and they can help and support that. And there's been some really beautiful sacred moments in front of the camera or on stage where that's happened for me. And so I don't really like the saying of like, the show must go on, right? That can, I feel, can be old school and kind of callous. I think that we do need to, of course, this is our job, and we have to go and we have to perform, because a lot of money is involved in producing a show, and people are paying good money to come see the show. And it's a lot of trouble to reissue tickets and reschedule and that kind of a thing. So I get it from a business standpoint that the show must go on. But I think, well, we have to protect our physical and mental health. And if we are hurting, we have to determine, is it enough for the show not to go on, or can I power through and then take care of what I need to after? And that's something between you, your stage manager, the other actors, so depending on the situation. But I think for the most part, the show can go on, and you can have that support from fellow actors. And I think even sometimes the audience can sense there's something special going on.
If somebody needs to come alongside you and provide that degree of support or understanding or advocacy even in the moment, what is your work language? For me, it's understanding and recognition. What about you? What do people do to help you feel like somebody's got your back?
A word I would use for actors is empathy. I feel like that's what we do, is we study human beings or animals, but mostly human beings, and we walk in their shoes. And so I think there's an awareness in the theater community or in the film community, acting community, where we have that superpower in a way. It's like someone can walk in a room and we know something's off. And I think that we look out for each other. It's like this tribe of people, these vagabonds, and we are an eclectic bunch. And we come from all different backgrounds and have all different ways of seeing the world. And so I think it's really incredible that we can come together with that empathy and take care of each other. It's really a deep care. And I just feel it. And I think other people coming into the space, like I have people come backstage after the show and they feel accepted immediately. Like they'll just be like, oh, these are great people. You know, these are theater people, right? And I know, being a young person, finding my place in the world, I found my people in the theater or in the choir, in the arts, right? And the same when I got older and in college, I had instant friends just by walking into a room. So I think the theater community in general, or the acting community in general, takes care of their own.
I used to love going to rap parties because there would be obviously people in their costumes and they're kind of winding down, the makeup's all smeared off or whatever, but there are almost always Monty Python and Princess Bride quotes flying everywhere. And speaking of that, is there something that's like a guilty pleasure, something that you always quote, a movie, a TV show, a song, something that just maybe would surprise people, but is there a guilty pleasure kind of thing that you like to roll out when you're just kind of kicking up your heels and winding down after a show?
Yeah, we love Christopher Guest movies, and especially Waiting for Guffman is one. We're always quoting that movie because it's community theater and it's just a great one that we always laugh about. And of course, in the theater community, that's a huge one. So any Christopher Guest movie, any of those actors, we just quote and love and all of it. So yeah, that'd have to be my pick.
Oh, good. Spinal Tap is another one of those.
Yeah.
They have to be theater people. It can be the rockers or just people who are fans of shameless sarcasm.
Right.
Those quotes. It goes to 11, and it's always a fun time when somebody starts quoting and like, okay, I'm in. And
exactly.
Catch up, you still laugh along, and hey, you might learn a new little inside joke.
Yep.
I was just thinking about how when you go to a performance, there's that one person usually dressed in some kind of nice suit or dress, and they walk around with the little chimes. Bing, boom, bing, boom, 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 bing, boom. Sort of that gentle reminder to come back to the seats after the intermission. The theatrical experience. It's so genteel. It's so kind. Of course, you're going to have brutish louts and rude people everywhere you go. But there's a civility that's built in to the theatrical experience, even as the audience. Austin is a wonderful performing arts town, and we go see ballet and symphony and opera and musicals and all manner of stage performances, and people genuinely enjoy themselves. They want to be there.
Yeah.
Sure, that's very fulfilling for you as a performer with the curtain calls and the ovations and all, but just looking out and seeing maybe shades of yourself as a youngster in the audience or a teenager, wide-eyed and watching all of this unfold, maybe for the first time and maybe seeing something for the 10th time. But they know just there's, like you mentioned earlier, something special is happening. That's just a great observation as an appreciator. And I wouldn't necessarily call myself a patron of the arts to have 6 figures behind my name in the program. But every time we see something come through, we're there, we're enjoying it. We pay respect to the people whose hard work and dedication go into it. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about what your take is on the people behind the scenes, the ones that never get a chance to get any kind of screen time or their names are flying by on the credits, the sound, the lighting, the costume people. I know you were saying also that you spend some time sort of behind the scenes. So why don't you share with me a little bit about what your life is like, either as a behind the scenes professional or how you interact with those folks while you're on set.
First, I'll talk about that community of artisans and artists and designers to have a production be like you see in a professional way, like on Broadway with all the sets and the costumes and the lights, or even a community theater production where you have all of those things. When you're watching a movie, the behind the scenes people are crucial for that to even happen. I remember a professor in college who was like, well, an actor can just stop on the street and just start acting in the middle of the street, and like a busker, it's just like no big deal. And I just thought, sure, they could do that. But how much more of an art form can it be when you have those designers and those other people contributing in a way? I find that there's no more of a collaborative art form than musical theater or a Shakespeare play or a film, in the sense that you have people from all different places coming at it for one purpose and to do their best work to make this show just that much better for the enjoyment of others, to lift others, to bring light and hope and inspiration to others. I just think it's beautiful and how it works. It's this beautiful tapestry. And we're finding as the arts evolve in film and on stage with technology and different things like that, where you have these other people coming in that are starting to contribute, like you have Avatar, Fire and Ash, and all of the CGI stuff. I mean, it's beautiful, right? It's like paintings. We're looking at these magnificent works of art in front of us. And behind the scenes, you have these actors who are in these motion capture suits, still putting in 100% with their job as actors. Anyway, I just think it's so collaborative and beautiful. And honestly, you wouldn't be able to see what you see as the final product if we didn't have those behind the scenes artists and artisans and crew members. I can't say enough about the camaraderie you can have as a performer with the people behind the scenes. There's jokes, a track that we have, and we follow that same track backstage every night. You've got to be a certain place every time, so you make your entrance on time. And you'll see the same crew person, and you have little high fives or jokes or whatever it is. And there's a real support. And I try and learn their names and make sure that I know their interests, and I talk to them. And, I want it to be a good experience for them backstage, because like you said, they don't get those accolades, or we get to go out and the audience applauds our work, but they don't really get that. It's like they worked really hard too, and they have to learn the show as well to move the sets or to bring down the fly or to do the spotlight or whatever it may be. But I never want them to feel less than. And I have been in that position where I've been a technician backstage, and there were actors that made me feel less than. And this was in my college years. And I swore to myself I would never do that. I was like, I will never treat anybody that poorly. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's just uncalled for. We're all in this together, and let's make sure that we treat each other with kindness and respect, because I've been the lead actor in a show. You kind of set the precedent of how people are treated. You kind of are the person that kind of sets the tone in the room as the leader. And I always want to set one of kindness, respect, hard work, professionalism, right? And people will follow. And I don't swear in real life. And it's really funny how when I'm on a set or a show, people won't swear around me. They just know, oh, Tamari doesn't swear. And I don't recognize it sometimes. I'm like, oh, you guys, that's so kind that you don't do that, because I don't. And so I just think, again, it's respect, right? And it's beautiful. So that's one wonderful thing about theater and film. And then working behind the scenes helped me so much, because I could consistently work in the theater while I was having kids, while I was pregnant, while I was maybe not getting cast. Sometimes when you move to a new community, it takes a while for you to get cast in a show. And so I would just volunteer to work behind the scenes. And then I started getting paid, and I learned a lot by working behind the scenes, and it's consistent work and it's in demand. So if you want to do theater and you're an artist or a designer of any kind, look into it, because they need people. Makeup, wigs, costumes, all of it. They need them.
Really enhances the way that somebody experiences a show. Sometimes I sit there in awe and almost in tears at costuming and the beauty on stage. We saw a performance of the Sleeping Beauty a couple years ago, and just very moving. And you don't always catch up on what's being sung because it's in another language, or you get swept up in the moment. But it's so easy to get caught up in the visuals that sometimes you don't exactly hear everything, but you see it, and it becomes this multimedia immersive enjoyment. I love that.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Sounds like you may have early on seen somebody make the mistake, but do you have something that if you're working with somebody or see them do it, you gently give them correction, something that people do that they shouldn't? Not from a ethics or morality standpoint, because everybody's got their own style, and it's great that you don't work blue and you want people to speak respectfully around you because you're a lady. And it's one of the things that I really like about you, even knowing you for all these years. You're somebody that people automatically respect because you carry yourself with that aplomb. But is there something that maybe you would wish that people would stop doing, even professionally or strategically within your realm?
That's a really great question. There was something that came to mind right away when I heard that was negativity and gossip behind people's backs. You experience it often, like in a dressing room situation, or I wouldn't say often, but you do experience it sometimes. And it really brings down the morale. I don't think you realize it at the time, because you're like, I think when I was younger, I might have been more apt to get involved with that. Like, oh, so-and-so and this, and that gossip situation. But pretty early on, recognize it was harmful to the environment. And it was that negativity. And even when a person would come into the room, say a dresser, she would come into the room and she would get us ready and she would leave. And then immediately some of the people would start talking about that girl. And I was like, hey, that's not cool, right? So you have to be with these people for a while in a dressing room. So you don't want to create too much waves in how you approach this. But often what I would do is say, I've often find that she's like this. And I would change it to a more positive statement about that person. And immediately the vibe in the room would change, and they would start, oh yeah. And then if I kind of set that precedent after a while and I would never talk bad about that person, then they would never talk about her with me in the room. And I don't know what they would do when I wasn't in the room. But for me, it was like, okay, at least they know that that's not cool and that we shouldn't be doing that. And that it feels a lot better. It's a better working environment when we can be positive about people. So gossip is a killer, I think.
How do you deal with the situation when, let's say, the leadership on the set, the director, the producer, the head writer, or whatever, is nothing just but a black rain cloud? How do you handle conflict? Do you have somebody from a union that can step in on your behalf? Is there somebody who takes the reins and pulls that person aside? Or do you just kind of have to deal with it and maybe consider working with them ever again? What's the conflict resolution in that?
Yeah. Professionally, yes, you usually have someone assigned from the union who will report that person, or I'm sure there's a progression of steps that are taken where they might be talked to by the producer or whatever. If it's the producer, then I'm not sure who talks to them because they're usually top dog when it comes to, they're the money people, right? But the producer's not often on set. So it would mainly be like if it was your director or cinematographer or something, if they were just brutal and you were just like, wow, we have to be on eggshells around this person, or they are angry a lot or yelling at people a lot. That's one great thing about a union is you have that in place where you have a hierarchy, a place of where you can report it and get it taken care of. I have done some non-union things as well. In fact, right now in Utah, I don't have my union card. I decided to not have it because I get more work in Utah because of demand for people who are non-union. And so again, there's a hierarchy of people you report to anyway, even if you're not part of a union. So you still follow those protocols. And then always, like you said, I know, okay, I have to work with this person. So I try to kill them with kindness. I try to never match their level of whatever they're putting out. I don't match it. I just stay calm and kind and level-headed. And I might flatter them. I might joke with them. I kind of feel it out a little bit to kind of soften them a little so that they're not so abrupt. And that usually helps. And there's other actors that will do that as well. And it kind of gets a little better. And then I make a mental note to not work with that person again. And sometimes I'll be surprised. They might ask me back and I'll think about it. I might go back depending on what went down and how it ended. But sometimes I'll be like, no, thank you. I have another project going on or whatever. So you can be choosy that way.
When it comes to placements, do you have an agent that you work with? How otherwise do you do marketing and representation of your skills to a role or a film company or a theater company?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I was doing film here in Utah, I did it for about 10 years. I just recently retired and I had an agent, and that's how I got all of my work, was through my agent here in Utah. There were some people that worked independently, but it's a lot more challenging. I preferred to have the agent because they have a lot of connections and they met me with the right casting directors, got me into the right rooms. I had assigned times. When I lived on the East Coast and I was auditioning for professional theater in New York City, at first I did not have an agent, and it was just those cattle call lines where you waited in line for a film, a play, whatever it was. You would wait all day and you wouldn't be guaranteed you would be seen. And then I started freelancing with an agent when I got to a certain point, and then you'd have assigned times. With the freelance, once you start getting work, then they sign you eventually. But I would say with theater in general, like if you're just going to work in theater professionally, regionally, across the nation, in not a major city like Chicago, New York, or LA, I would say you don't necessarily need an agent. I think there's the theater community, and you just audition an audition, and they start to get to know you through the auditions. That's why it's important when you come into an audition that you are professional. The moment you hit that front door and walk in, you treat their staff well, and that you represent yourself professionally, you dress professionally, and you just treat everyone well, because they'll talk about it to the director and the casting director. Word gets around real quick, like, this person's difficult to work with. Doesn't always mean you won't get cast, but it's a little bit harder, I would say. So that's just more networking and more building yourself up from the ground until you get known in the community. And it doesn't take too long, usually about a year or so.
Speaking of networking, Do you ever attend events? Are there conferences that either you had in the past? I know you were saying you maybe aren't doing film as much, so maybe the connections with people are slightly different. But what about the idea of networking, either virtually or in person, getting together with your fellow co-parts and learning, sharing, not gossiping, but it's kind of talking about your business?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's important to meet as artists. And I think often when you've done a show with somebody or you're just starting out in a community, you rally around each other. And we would often get together with other actors and we would do play readings just in other people's homes, or we would do writing groups. And we would meet a bunch of actors who would come in, or writers, playwrights, directors that would come into that space. And it was more like a mingle, and then we'd read the play and then we mingle after. And it was a great way to see, oh, there's this new actor in town and they were actually pretty good in that read. And then they say, hey, why don't you come and audition for this or that? So those are kind of fun parties to be a part of. And then they have donor parties often when you're in a show, sometimes with like Pioneer Theater, which is one of our equity houses here, which is the union house. I would be in the ensemble because I'm non-union. And so we would go to these big parties at a donor's house, and I would just make the rounds of the room and get to know the donors and get to know people. And then you'll see them all the time. You get more work at that theater. You start to get more supporting roles and that kind of thing. And there's like, oh, that person, I like that person, you know, and I think that has influence for the artistic director and the director of that theater. It definitely plays a part in who you know. They say like, it's who you know, right? And so you want to get yourself out there. You want to take non-paid projects at first and just hit the ground running and just do what you can to lay that foundation so that you start to meet people. Even if it's like college students, people you might disregard, eventually those college students are going to be directors and playwrights, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, that person, and they'll invite you in. So networking is really important in my line of work.
And you never know who's related to whom, and that assistant, whoever that might be, could be somebody's niece, nephew, son, daughter, best friend's kid, and they're sort of there as a plant. In tech terms, we call that the honeypot. Somebody who is there to see if somebody acts a certain way in a certain situation. And that could be filtering somebody out if their attitude is bad, if they're a creep, if they're a jerk, if they're great on camera, and then as soon as everything's done, get out of my way, that's my chair, and be generally a cactus. I'm sure there's a lot of those where there's sly plants of, I like working with her, she's always nice to everybody, I can see her in this role. And I've also heard that sometimes filmmakers will write roles with certain people in mind. That's a way of finding your way through where maybe it was a pleasant surprise.
Yeah, I have some people that give me a call sometimes. I coach young people, college level. Well, it's more like to get into college, like so later high school for their competitions and to get into colleges. And I will often have people call me. That individual tried out for a play and they'll say, how was it coaching them? How was it working with them? So it does happen, that networking thing, it just spindles out. It's a small community.
Hearing what other people think of you, or perhaps how you put an impression on a room. And as the title of this podcast suggests, what do you wish you would have known when you were 21 or 22 or whatever other age range or professional stage? What do you wish that you would have known that would have made it a little easier or less stressful, more fulfilling, whatever that might look like?
Yeah, I wish I would have known that auditions are primarily what you're going to be doing. There's going to be a lot of rejection. And I think I kind of knew that early on. I had a great start in the theater as a kid, so I was cast pretty regularly. And then as I got older, I kind of hit a wall. There's certain ages that are a little more awkward or gawky, or you're kind of in that transition between you can't play a kid, but you can't really play an adult. And so I would give advice to, in those down times when you're trying to figure that out or trying to get to the next place, is to study, is to put in the time to take lessons and be coached and consume everything you can and just learn all that you can. Don't let it be a waste of time when you're not getting cast. Treat the audition like a performance. Have fun. Don't get, again, too in your head or too stressed. Now that we have mostly auditions on tape, the camera picks up the panic in your eyes, right? It's really keen on that. So if you're not there, if you're not present, the director's going to see it right away. So you have to get to that place in your audition where you can just lay it down and just be, again, welcome to my living room, very confident and be the person that they want to work with. And so I think that's the advice I would have given my young self, is just don't waste that downtime in between jobs and work hard on that audition material, work hard on just your technique as a dancer, as an actor, and as a singer. So, yeah.
But in the work, there's 10,000 hours.
Yep.
A little bit of a cliche, but practice breeds perfection.
Yeah, it truly does.
And speaking of quotes and whatnot, is there something that resonates with you? A quote, a saying, something on a coffee cup or a tote bag or a t-shirt? What is one that just really resonates, that just, if you're having a bad day or whatever, what's a quote that...
Yeah. I have a couple, and one I learned from Mr. Rogers. I know he has a broader actual quote on this, but it's just to be kind. And that's something, I learned as a kid, and my mom drilled into me. It was just be kind. I think that takes you far in any venture that you're on. And then for me, I deal with anxiety, always have my whole life. And my first child that I had, he has autism. And I learned in raising him, especially when he was very young, to stay calm. And that practice has really helped me in not just raising my children, but in every aspect of my job. Like I said, there's that flight or fight mode in our brains. I know it's more extensive than just fight or flight, but it's just, I'm in a high stress job. I have to put myself out there, and I have to be in front of a lot of people, and I have to just turn it on. Like you said, okay, action, go. And I have to be in a calm presence of mind to be able to play, to be able to do my job. And so I often have to breathe and just stay calm. And so those two definitely have helped me throughout my life.
Be calm and kind. I think that's people from all walks can definitely take some wisdom from. So what is your career goal for the next 3 to 5 years? What does it look like?
Right. So I've taken a shift. I've stepped away from in front of the camera, and I'm now doing voiceover work. And so about 2 years ago, my husband and I built this little studio in my home, and some friends were having some success at it. And I was doing some voiceover stuff when I was with my agency for film. Like they would have me voice over commercials and things like that. And I really enjoyed it. And I thought, maybe this is something I want to pursue. And so I started delving into that. And I've had to learn the tech side of things. I've had to learn how to edit my auditions, and sometimes people want a finished WAV file before we send it in, and then they kind of finesse it, but they want it cleaned up, and they want what they normally would have maybe done in the studio back in the day. We now, as voiceover actors, have to do all of that. So it's been a real learning curve for me in my middle age to learn this new technology and to perfect all of that, but it's been so much fun, and I have just loved delving into that. And I'll do anything, like voiceover for video games or commercial work or books on tape or whatever the case may be. I just love it all. And it's been such a great thing because I'm a singer first and foremost. So it's just been fun to utilize my voice in different ways, and what can it do here? And it's just been a great adventure. And so that will be my focus, I think, the next 3 to 5 years, is really focusing on building up my business. I don't have an agent. I'm putting myself out on my own. So I'm learning business skills as well, and promotion skills. And I'm still tinkering with how I'll put myself out there. I've had a social media presence for a long time, but it's always been private because I had my kids on there, because it started out just for my family. And then all of a sudden people are like, oh, you need a social media and you need so many followers. And I'm like, oh dear. So I might start up something new with that, like a new Instagram or maybe a website or something. But at this point, I usually don't give out my social because it's more private for family purposes. But I need to get into that. It's funny how we straddle that. All that generational stuff, right? We started out in the 70s and 80s, and here we are, and this technology is just incredible. And social media, who knew? It's its own beast.
It's the benefit of LinkedIn too, because you get to be your professional self without feeling like I have to wedge in family or faith or anything other.
Very true.
This is my work. And it's okay to be just a little dry and procedural, because everybody else most likely, or on the average, is doing work on there too. So a lot of people will cultivate a really good LinkedIn presence, perhaps even have a website. They're pretty easy to build now through Squarespace, Wix, and some of the coding tools. You don't necessarily have to have an agency or be a full-time developer. to at least create a digital footprint or a marketplace for yourself. So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you for a role, a position, voiceover work, how would they go about contacting you?
They probably could go to my LinkedIn. I think that would probably be the best space. I'm trying to build that up as well. And it's mostly now for my voiceover work, but that's definitely a place they could go.
Great. I'll make sure to put a link in the details. Thank you again for taking time to enlighten us with your experience and sharing some inspiration. This has been Troy Vera from the WIWHK podcast. Join us again, and we appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you so much, Troy.
Wish I would have known.